When was that? Because I should say dates.
It's the Mediterranean diet,
Yes.
I think.
It was December.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah, I
was
guess I can
here. It was December.
It's the Mediterranean diet, I think.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome to The Rest is Just Noise. In early December of 2021, I was lucky enough to attend the Seattle meeting of the Acoustical Society of America. And so today, now that it's 3 months later, 3 months later, and we're recovered.
You're back.
I'm recovered from the flights and eventually from COVID. We can go ahead and give you a quick little rundown of my thoughts on the conference and some of the interesting talks that I heard. So my name is Andrew Mitchell. I'm an acoustician and a soundscape researcher.
My name is Tin Oberman, and I usually go the third. But no,
It's okay.
So he's second.
okay, yeah. So my name is. I'm a soundscape researcher.
Hi, I'm Francesco Letta. I'm an architect and a soundscape researcher.
And he's the only one who can speak.
Yeah.
It's the Mediterranean
So
diet.
we hope you enjoy this quick little recap of the ASA conference in Seattle. When was that? Months later. When was that? The rest is just noise. Actually, Nicole doesn't listen to these podcasts, so we're fine. All right, so yeah, I thought I'd give you guys a little bit of a rundown on the Acoustical Society conference in Seattle that happened all of 3 months ago because we had to digest it and recover from COVID. So,
Yay.
so I think first off, I'm gonna just give you a real quick rundown of some interesting talks that I went to, and then maybe a bit of a longer talk on my general thoughts of soundscape in the American context.
Oh,
Hey.
And how it tends to get done and presented on over there.
so it's the country south of Canada where it all started.
Yeah.
That's true. So the first talk that I wanted to bring up in this sort of rapid fire that I thought was really interesting was on electric vehicle additive sounds.
Mm-hmm.
By Michael Rowan from Penn State. And essentially what they were looking at was trying to do these real world like in situ measurements where they had students sitting on a road, projected, I'm sure, on a like empty road, and they were all just sitting there, and they sent an electric car past it, past where the students were sitting, and they had to press a button when they could notice that the car was coming. I can't remember if they were blindfolded or anything, but like, you know, just when they could hear it coming, they would press a button. And they did this with a variety of like piped in background sounds. So they had speakers set up around them so that they could raise and lower the ambient background noise. And then they were testing out different types of sounds that you could add to an electric vehicle. Because as we know, an electric car is pretty quiet at low speeds.
I mean, like one creeped up on me behind me. I was walking on this little residential road, and the guy needed to honk to move me. So I moved to the sidewalk, and it was like, wow.
And so that's one of these questions with, as we move forward into more and more electric cars, and particularly like here in London, all the taxis are now moving to electric. All the famous London black taxis are electric. So the question is, if people rely on the sound of an engine to know that a car is about to hit them,
the buses as well.
How do we deal with that when we have silent cars?
Yeah.
Since below 60 kilometers an hour or something, it's driven by engine noise and not by tire noise.
Yeah, it's 20 miles per hour is the...
Is it? I always forget where the cutoff is.
20... No, sorry.
I swear I'd seen recently it was 60, but that's not the important part is one of the solutions is we just put speakers on the car and we have it play sounds.
Yeah.
And so the question, one of the questions they were testing is with these different sounds, what's the probability of detection versus distance? And what's the effectiveness of different sounds? And how do we balance that with problems like their contribution to noise pollution and false alarm rates?
Yes.
Right? Because as someone who focuses mostly on noise pollution aspect, I would love to say no sound,
stay quiet,
make them all super quiet.
Yeah.
But that probably doesn't work overall, and it feels weird to me to say, we need to add sound back in when the main one of the big
positive
benefits,
alarming sounds.
But
there was a talk. There were some guys in one of the internoises a while ago when they talked about adding trying out the Star Wars vehicle sounds.
Wow.
So you can have a TIE fighter go past you.
Yeah.
So, but then would that kind of sound always be present, or be triggered whenever the vehicle is approaching?
I think the idea is it would always be present, because if it's just when the vehicle is approaching,
from the driver's point of view.
But they could do a thing like when vehicle detects that there's a, I don't know, sign of life, like in Star Trek, somewhere around, then it starts emitting the sound, because otherwise...
But if we're relying on that, why not just have automatic braking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to me, it seems like it would need to be an always thing, or always below a certain speed. Because as we say, higher speeds, it's driven by you've got most of the noise coming from the tires anyway.
So, like the example I mentioned, it was like a very small street, so the car was moving super slow.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was so silent. So
that was super cool, and I thought the test setup they had was really interesting, where they were incorporating these different background levels and trying out different types of, I think they were mostly pink noise or different variations on white noise and pink noise and filtered and all that sort of stuff. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. Just last question. So the pool of participants they had normal vision, because I know that there is a lot of concerns also among
the visually impaired
societies, and groups who
that's why I think
advocate for,
if I'm remembering correctly, I think they were blindfolded.
Okay, blindfolded.
That may I'm not certain, but he does mention in his abstract that it's a safety concern, particularly for the vision. So they were thinking about that a bit.
He can now come back and shout at us and say,
"No, I
explained this so well
during the presentation." Okay, next one.
The next one is actually a poster, or actually two posters that I saw that were related to each other, which is of particular interest to me. It's a deep learning package for creating acoustic detectors and classifiers named Ketos. And so any listeners who are interested in creating a deep learning model for audio classification, go and check out Ketos, because it looks quite interesting. Basically, there are all of these existing libraries for making neural networks and then training them, like something like TensorFlow or Keras, or these different things where you can build the network. But there are specific aspects to doing it for sound that are pretty consistent across any application. You need to calculate a spectrogram of some sort, or process the waveform in some way. You need to do these training and testing splits and all that sort of stuff. And basically they've put it all into a package where that pipeline is made easier. Creating a database of sounds is made easier, or of analyzed sounds. And then some standard architectures for audio neural networks are pre-made and you can call it up and train a new one.
So can we do it? Could I do it on my own? No.
You need to know how to program in Python. But for instance, I'm not a neural network specialist, but I know how to do machine learning and programming in Python, and this actually would make it quite a bit easier for me to do. And for one of our projects where we're using neural networks, if I had known about this about 3 months earlier, it would have made some of my audio processing quite a bit easier and making a database that you can then pull directly in and all that. So I just wanted to bring...
Did you have a chance to speak to the authors? Or
I did.
Okay.
So it was Oliver Kersebaum from Dalhousie University, which is in... Yeah, we're back up in Canada there. So one of the really interesting things about it was, I think the poster session for this was the animal bioacoustics poster session. And their intention, and even the logo for this package and all of that, was for underwater animal recognition, right? So like recognizing whale sounds and that sort of stuff. But I went up and asked him, and I'm like, is this generalizable? Will it work for environmental sounds or all these things? And initial response was he kind of hadn't really considered that. But there's no reason it shouldn't.
It's just
and that was
much less dBs than under the sea.
And it was a sort of general trend that I noticed at the ASA, that in general, if an abstract title said like machine learning or like audio recognition or something like that, even though the title seemed quite broad,
the application was narrow.
They were almost always bioacoustic stuff.
Okay.
And it to me felt a little bit strange that it felt like
there is no machine learning application outside of...
There definitely are applications, but they weren't presented that way. And it felt like some of the animal bioacoustics people who are doing very good work and have advanced a lot, even beyond what we have done, I think, in a lot of environmental sound recognition, kind of weren't considering that an application was outside of bioacoustics.
They could extend the scope.
I guess. I mean, you can't ask animals for the PAQs and stuff. you need to work harder.
I suspect, this is a little bit uninformed, but I suspect part of the reason the bioacoustics, particularly underwater bioacoustics, has moved forward further than environmental is they might be sort of less overlapping stuff, right? So when we're talking about environmental sound recognition, in a real world application in a city, you have many different sources all overlapping at once, all sharing the same frequency space.
Sure.
Whereas in some underwater stuff, it's more separated.
Okay.
So you're likely to have one dominant whale sound that either there's not much else going on at that time, or there just isn't much else going on in that frequency range. Right. And they have specific calls and things like that, which you can more easily recognize.
Sure. So actually, are you saying there's less noise in the ocean than
less overlapping noise of different signals of interest? Right. Okay. So it may be noise behind it, but in environmental sound recognition for cities, pretty much anything which creates the noise is also part of the interest.
In the same frequency range. Yes.
Right.
True.
Like we may have people talking and birdsong and cars all happening at once, and we'd like to know about all of those.
Yes, and they do overlap. Yeah,
and they overlap in the frequency space and constantly in the time space. Whereas in bioacoustics, they may be saying, "I just want to know where the whale songs are," and not, "I want to know when it's a whale, when it's a boat, when it's, I don't know." So that's what that's my sort of speculation for why there's this difference in the tasks.
I'm certain that boats are messing up with the whale song a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. But as far as what you can actually train a model to identify and classify, I think for whatever reason, there's also more money in that space. Which
climate change? I don't know.
Yeah. Which actually, that kind of brings me to a second one on underwater sound, which, let's see. is titled "The Effect of COVID-19 on Underwater Sound."
Mm-hmm.
And so this one, I'm now trying to rack my brain for the specifics.
Can COVID swim? That's the word.
Is there a transmission underwater?
Can the virus swim?
Or does it make sound?
Yeah.
I don't think that.
That wasn't the focus. Okay, sorry. No. Sorry about that.
So this is by David Barkley, also of Dalhousie University, who was looking at the effect of the different lockdowns and shipping restrictions or potential shipping restrictions on...
but then how the Suez Canal
shipping, well, he was looking
that?
in Canada.
Sure, but...
So I don't know how much that... but so I think they took some inspiration from both from news stories and from the same sort of work that we've looked at of, look, cities are all getting quieter.
Sure,
and also we've seen disruptions in shipping. Can we actually see that in the noise change in shipping?
So does a Suez Canal or COVID make a larger difference for... Well, sorry.
I don't think these things overlapped in this study, did. I don't remember them talking about the Suez Canal, is all I can say.
Because it's a huge disruption.
What was the name of the Evergreen?
Evergreen,
yes.
So it's essentially, I think they kind of expected to see a big decrease in general ocean noise from shipping. But again, kind of similar to what we saw, it was different in different locations. You know, whether you're at the mouth of a port or further out in the ocean, there were differences in how much it actually had an impact on the underwater sound.
The silly question I have is, do these kind of stations for measurements, are they fixed stations?
Yeah,
or?
I think so.
Okay, so they're not like on boats?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think they're fixed because they've been out there a while.
Okay.
So I would assume that they aren't just on boats.
Okay.
But yeah, they've got hydrometers somewhere out there at these different points in the port and then
on
further
the
out.
routes. Okay.
But yeah, so that one was, again, I can't remember that much from it, but it was quite interesting to see. Then the final one I want to talk about of a single specific quickfire thing. Was the COVID-19 effects on social isolation for older persons with sensory loss.
Okay.
By Peggy Nelson from the University of Minnesota. And so this one was very interesting. They were they were working with groups of older people with various different sensory impairments that they'd been working with, I think, for a while. And doing updated interviews at 6-week intervals. And they were looking at how their well-being and social isolation was impacted by COVID-19, which I think we could assume would be quite a bit. And so they say, overall results show the widespread impact of the pandemic on social interactions and emotional well-being of older adults with sensory loss. And all three groups, so the three groups they had were vision loss, hearing loss, what was it? Vision loss, hearing loss, and a control, right? All three groups had worse scores during the pandemic, but those with visual impairments were especially vulnerable. And I think that...
Why?
I think it's because we went virtual, right?
Okay.
So many things were face-to-face with no, like
with the screen. Or
and no touch.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're thinking social isolation, when you can't touch anyone and you have vision impairment, that must feel very isolating. But
so how does sound come in?
So what was interesting was those with hearing loss. So they say although facial coverings impaired speech intelligibility for older people with hearing loss, the quieter acoustic environment during stay-at-home restrictions of gatherings may have mediated the negative effects. So if I'm remembering correctly, actually, the group with hearing loss actually had slightly better, still bad, but slightly better impacts than even the control group.
Because everybody was together.
Yeah.
So okay.
And speculating again, presumably some of it would also be like if everything's on Zoom and you now have much better automated speech transcription, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Where I've noticed that that's gotten way better over the last year.
And
I
mean, it's entertaining if it gets wrong.
Well, I don't know. It's entertaining for those of us who can hear what they're saying and then read what's wrong and just go, stupid system. But
it must be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought that was, again, a very interesting, very important
topic. Yeah.
Look at how people were specifically impacted by these things. So that's my sort of quick fire of just a few interesting ones.
Mm-hmm.
But what about soundscape?
So that's what I wanted to get to. Is
the grand finale.
Some general thoughts on the soundscape session. So I presented in the soundscape session that we had, which was chaired by Bennett Brooks and David Woolworth. And there were some good presentations in it. The frustration I had was some of the approach to soundscape that seemed to me to be sort of dominant there. It just it felt old. Like, it was very much a focus on sound walks. And I actually started my presentation. I was the first one to present in the session. And mine was on, I started my presentation basically by saying, I'm kicking this off, but I am not doing sound walks.
Okay, nice.
Nothing in this presentation will be a sound walk. Because ours was about this model we built to predict the soundscape perception during the lockdown conditions. And a lot of the consultants that I spoke to outside of this session, their general response to soundscape was, it sounds very interesting. I'd love to be able to use it. Just what I've seen of it, I don't know how we would put this into practice. And I think they were trying to address that in this session by having some people give presentations from a consultant's point of view on soundwalks and how they used it, which in general is engaging the community that you're designing with a bit more. Right? And getting better feedback from that community. And that's great.
Yes.
But that is quite a limited use case and limited to quite wealthy projects, which the two examples that were given in this session were...
Yeah, you need resources for soundwalk, you need time, and...
Were well-funded projects. And
but come on, soundwalk is like the key part of the standard.
I'm kind of saying it shouldn't be. Like, I think it is a crucial part, but it's one part of the soundscape approach.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's part of my problem with the difference between what I see in soundscape seminars in the UK and Europe versus in America. It seems like the vast majority of the focus historically in America has been on soundwalk, and quite small soundwalks. Whereas Europe is taking a broader, sort of more innovative approach to it. Because, soundwalks are one method. I mean, even in the standard, they're one method, right?
Yep.
There are two other potential methods given in the standard of post hoc interviews, or not really given in the standard, but our own method of large questionnaires.
Sure, but I mean, standard allows also for lab stuff.
So, and lab stuff, exactly. Yeah. So that's the sort of thing I'm arguing against, is broadening the conception of what soundscape is to where it includes soundwalk as a core component, but it's not just that.
There's more than soundwalk, soundwalks, yes.
And that was kind of confirmed for me when we went and did a soundwalk, because after this session, we had quite a nice planned soundwalk around Seattle, and it highlighted for me some of the limitations of soundwalks, which was, as far as the limitations of soundwalks, as far as actually discussing a space, as opposed to discussing the perception of the individuals in that space. Because we had this planned route where we were looking at the soundscape of Seattle.
Sure.
And it was a group of acoustics professionals and researchers from all over the world who aren't from Seattle.
Sure.
And had never been to these spaces, who were then assessing it. So we are not giving an accurate representation of how people who use those spaces actually perceive it.
But then you are rid of the bias.
But that's exactly, well,
sure.
But even if you're thinking about like tourists, who cares how we acoustic professionals perceive the space? Or even this small group of of sort of a strange group of tourists. That's not an accurate representation of even visitors who pass through that space.
No, sure, but come on, it was just an activity to entertain the participants and so on, and to learn about the tool if somebody never walked in. It was.
I think the general idea is also that you need to triangulate then that kind of information. So you cannot rely solely on the sound walk. That's the main idea, right? So you have to cross-reference other data collection methods and approaches. So
But thinking about that, one of the triangulation methods that are done in this is recording the sound environment at the time, right? Sure. And so the first space that we went to was this intersection of some roads. So it was very noisy. It was planned to be quite noisy. And there was even construction going on right next door. So one of the buildings on the corner. So the whole group got there. It was very noisy. There was a lot of construction going on. And we then said, okay, stop and listen for a minute and write down, answer the survey that we've got. And we're going to take a sound level reading. Just so happened that the timing of that minute was during the red lights. And all the construction guys had gone for lunch or something.
Sure.
So it was actually relatively quiet.
Yeah, I mean, come on. It
was entirely unrepresentative of that.
Was that reflected in the questionnaire data? So
I'm not certain. I haven't seen any of the data.
But it's like, we don't need to use soundscape to represent the truth about the space. It's about truth about time we're looking at.
But I don't even think that would have been a truth about the time, because it was fairly quiet in that space. But I would bet because all the cars had just passed all of us, we've still got that in our mind. So we would still answer it as quite chaotic.
Sure, but I mean,
and annoying. But the sound level meter says, oh, it's actually only 50 dB.
Okay.
Is that representative of what actually influenced our perception? Or of the space
That's
itself?
That's a great case study to discuss about soundscape.
I mean,
and how it works.
The message here is we'll keep sending Andrew to ASA meetings and soundscape sessions so he can be the Trojan horse for, whatever Europe is plotting.
I wanted to ask, did you manage to visit the great Lawrence Halprin fountain concrete thing there next to the freeway?
I don't think so.
The waterfall. It's a huge waterfall.
I don't think so.
I should have briefed you about that before you went.
And unfortunately, I didn't manage to make it through the entire sound walk. I had to leave like 3/4 of the way through to go to another meeting.
Oh, it's a shame.
But it did just kind of highlight to me some of the problems with applying sound walks more generally as a new way of doing urban noise mitigation or assessment or anything like that.
Is that sound walks are not new anymore.
There's also that. I mean, that's part of the thing. Again, I spoke to a lot of consultants, both people I knew before and have met before, who were quite interested in the concept of incorporating soundscape into their practice, but just cannot seem to figure out a way that it really makes sense. And sound walks have been around and have been presented and spoken about for 20 years easily at the ASA, and they haven't been picked up.
Yeah.
Which to me is an indication that whether or not soundscape thinks that it's the best approach,
something has to
it's
change.
Not going to get picked up in a noise control setting the way that a lot of people would like it to. So
yeah, that's a message.
Yeah.
When we are about at picking up, how was the catering at the ASA?
Yeah. Good coffee?
They didn't really have catering, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, they had...
because of COVID?
No, they did, actually.
Yeah, coffee breaks.
Yeah, they had coffee breaks, and they did have some dinners. It was fine.
Yeah?
It was nice.
Good.
Yeah, it's always been fun. I did... the New Orleans one was my favorite, though, because you could just walk down the street and have great New Orleans food. What more do you want?
But that was in ASA New Orleans
6 years ago.
Okay, sure.
But
okay, New Orleans better than Seattle, you say?
Yeah, we're gonna have to carry it out, right? We're gonna have to carry it out. Okay.
No, I think that's the main info.
So yeah, I think that's my general thoughts. Again, the presentations in the Soundscape session were very good, particularly from some of the other researchers. Dick Bottledorn presented on a new metric for characterizing complexity in an urban sound environment.
Okay.
Looking in, or not urban sound environment. He was looking in hospital soundscapes, or nursing home soundscapes. I can't remember which. And that one used some environmental sound recognition to go, we have this many overlapping sounds that contributes to the complexity of the sound environment.
I'm guessing Francesco knows something about that.
The Acoustic Air Project.
He may have worked on it, yeah. So I thought that one was fascinating. And he also started his presentation by going, so I'm not talking about sound walks at this sound walk session. And yeah, so I hope to see that evolve and develop a bit in American discussions a bit more. Okay. And I think there's an appetite for that with people.
Nice.
Yeah.
And that's it.
So that was it. Great. Thanks very much for listening to my rant and ramble.
You're welcome.
Looking forward to the next one.
Oh yeah, it'll go on.
So it's cut.
The rest is just noise.
You can find episodes of The Rest is Just Noise on all of your usual podcast apps.
And on our website at justnoisepod.com. We're also on Twitter as @justnoisepod.
The Rest is Just Noise is supported by the UK Acoustics Network. Plus.